A massive white hide lies stretched across a steel table. The sound of cold air humming through an industrial workshop. Outside, the Arctic wind moves across frozen landscapes, where survival depends on strength, insulation, and adaptation. How does one of the world's most iconic Arctic animals become part of a luxury leather sofa? And what really happens inside a facility designed to process hides, built for one of the harshest climates on Earth? The story begins far from showrooms and design studios. The polar bear has evolved over thousands of years to survive extreme cold with dense fur and thick skin that provide natural insulation. In rare, tightly regulated circumstances, legally sourced hides enter a carefully monitored supply chain. Every step, from documentation to preservation, is reviewed under strict wildlife protection laws. Inside specialized facilities, temperature-controlled environments prevent damage to the hide. Skilled technicians focus on preservation, durability, and craftsmanship rather than speed. The process is deliberate and highly regulated, reflecting both legal oversight and public scrutiny. This is not just a story about furniture. It's a closer look at how tradition, regulation, and modern luxury intersect in a world increasingly shaped by conservation and accountability. The polar bear is native to the Arctic regions of Alaska, Canada, Greenland, and parts of Russia. These animals are uniquely adapted to one of the harshest environments on Earth. Thick fur, dense fat layers, and powerful limbs allow them to survive freezing temperatures and long periods on sea ice. In the United States, polar bears are protected under the Marine Mammal Protection Act and the Endangered Species Act. These federal laws restrict hunting, trade, and importation. The goal is clear: protect vulnerable species and maintain stable wildlife populations for future generations. In parts of northern Canada, however, certain indigenous communities are legally permitted to hunt polar bears under carefully managed quota systems. These subsistence hunts are regulated by regional wildlife authorities and are rooted in long-standing cultural traditions. When hides enter legal trade channels, they must be documented, tagged, and tracked through a formal chain of custody. On the international level, any cross-border movement is governed by the CITES, the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species. This treaty requires export permits and scientific assessments to ensure that trade does not threaten the species' survival. Luxury products, sometimes marketed as Arctic leather, are therefore rare and highly regulated. The topic remains controversial, not only because of conservation concerns, but also because it touches on broader issues: wildlife protection, indigenous rights, global luxury markets, and sustainability debates. Understanding this context is essential before examining what happens inside any facility connected to this complex and closely watched supply chain. The process begins with legal acquisition and documentation. Before a hide can enter any facility, officials verify lawful sourcing through government-issued tags and export permits. Detailed chain of custody records track the material from its point of origin to the processing site, ensuring full traceability and compliance with wildlife trade regulations. When the hide arrives, it is typically frozen to prevent decomposition. During the initial inspection, technicians carefully examine thickness for density and any natural imperfections. This assessment determines how the material will be handled in the next stages. Thawing is done slowly inside temperature-controlled, cold rooms. This protects the hair follicles and preserves the structure of the skin. Once softened, specialists remove excess fat and connective tissue using precision scraping tools. Preparing the surface for stabilization, the tanning phase is critical. Chemical or mineral-based tanning agents bind to collagen fibers within the skin. This step prevents decay, increases flexibility, and strengthens long-term durability. Because Arctic-adapted hides are naturally dense and thick, treatment cycles may take longer and require close monitoring. After tanning, the hide moves into softening and conditioning. Mechanical tumbling loosens the fibers while carefully measured. Oils restore suppleness. The goal is to maintain both the integrity of the fur and the strength of the leather backing. Next comes cutting and upholstery preparation. Craftsmen design pattern layouts to minimize waste, since hide size is limited. Reinforcement layers may be added to meet furniture-grade durability standards. During assembly, the prepared hide is stretched over hardwood or metal frames. Precision stitching ensures structural stability and consistent appearance. In the final stage, brushing, trimming, and surface smoothing refine the texture. Close-up finishing highlights tactile details, creating the soft, controlled sounds often featured in ASMR-style production. One of the most fascinating details about the polar bear is that its fur is not actually white. Each strand is transparent and hollow, designed to reflect and scatter light. This optical effect helps the animal blend into snow-covered landscapes, creating the white appearance most people recognize. Beneath that fur is dark skin, which absorbs heat from the sun, a critical adaptation for Arctic survival. The hide itself is also unusually thick. Over thousands of years, polar bears evolved dense skin and fat layers to insulate against extreme cold. When processed, that natural thickness translates into a leather backing that is heavier and more durable than many conventional hides. This density affects every stage of handling, from tanning time to conditioning methods. Because of strict wildlife protection laws and international oversight, legally tradable hides are extremely limited. Only a small number ever enter the regulated market each year. That scarcity significantly increases the value of finished products, especially in luxury design sectors. In many cases, high-end Arctic-themed furniture pieces are valued more for their rarity and craftsmanship than for the raw material alone. Collectors and designers often focus on the uniqueness of the item, the traceable documentation, and the skill required to transform a dense, cold climate hide into a functional piece of furniture. International trade adds another layer of complexity. Export permits, scientific reviews, and customs inspections can take months to complete. Every document must align with conservation standards before shipment approval is granted. These factors, biology, regulation, scarcity, and craftsmanship, all contribute to why such products remain rare, closely monitored, and highly debated. In today's global marketplace, quality control in this industry begins long before processing ever starts. Compliance with wildlife protection laws is mandatory in both exporting and importing countries. In the United States, regulations such as the Marine Mammal Protection Act and international agreements like CITES set strict standards for documentation, transport, and trade. Without proper permits and verification, products cannot legally cross borders. Independent inspections often play a key role. Authorities and certified agencies review tagging records, export permits, and chain of custody paperwork to confirm lawful sourcing. These reviews are designed to ensure that materials entering the market meet conservation rules and that claims about origin are accurate and verifiable. At the same time, debate continues around balancing indigenous subsistence rights with long-term conservation priorities. In parts of northern Canada, regulated harvest systems are intended to respect cultural traditions while maintaining stable wildlife populations. Wildlife scientists regularly assess population data to determine sustainable limits, reflecting an ongoing effort to align tradition with environmental responsibility. Consumer expectations are also changing. Growing demand for synthetic and plant-based alternatives has begun influencing luxury design trends. Many manufacturers now explore materials that replicate the look and texture of rare hides without relying on wildlife sources. This shift reflects broader sustainability goals within the global marketplace. Transparency and traceability remain central to maintaining ethical standards and brand reputation. In a highly scrutinized industry, detailed documentation, third-party verification, and clear communication are essential. Ultimately, long-term viability depends not only on craftsmanship and rarity, but on responsible practices that can withstand public, legal, and environmental review. The journey from Arctic wildlife to luxury furniture is far more complex than it first appears. What may look like a finished design piece in a showroom represents layers of regulation, documentation, craftsmanship, and public scrutiny. Every step, from lawful sourcing to international transport to final assembly, operates within a tightly controlled legal framework shaped by conservation science. and global agreements. At the center of this conversation is the polar bear, a species that has become both a symbol of Arctic survival and a focal point in environmental discussions. Its presence in any commercial supply chain immediately raises larger questions that go beyond design or luxury. How should societies balance cultural traditions with species protection? Where's the line between regulated use and long-term preservation? And who decides what is sustainable? These are not simple questions. They connect wildlife management, indigenous rights, international commerce, and consumer ethics into one ongoing global debate. As scientific data evolves and climate conditions change, policies and public expectations continue to shift as well. In today's marketplace, sustainability is no longer a side issue. It is central to brand reputation and consumer trust. Many buyers now evaluate products not just for quality or rarity, but for transparency and environmental impact. As a result, the future of rare wildlife materials may depend less on demand alone and more on clearly defined ethical boundaries, verified sourcing, and the growth of alternative materials. Ultimately, this story is not just about furniture. It is about responsibility and how modern industries adapt when conservation, culture, and commerce intersect.